G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to discuss how to use leg drive in the bench press. So one of the most common technical flaws we see with newer lifters is problems with their leg drive. People either don't use it enough or use it in what we would call a dynamic way. We're going to go through the static method, which is our preferred method. So first off, we're going to have a quick chat about when we need to be using leg drive. For the most part, it's only really important for heavier sets. So we're talking sets of 6 reps and below. When we start to get to higher sets of bench, 8, 10 reps, it gets a bit out of hand to be applying heaps of leg drive every single rep. However, when I do work with newer lifters, I like to get them to use leg drive the same across all sets, just because when it is a new skill, it's good to use it often, multiple times a week, just to really hone in the skill. After a little while, when it becomes a bit more second nature, then they can just save it for their heavier work. We want to be able to rely on having the exact same leg drive every rep, and the static approach allows us to have that. If we can know that at the empty bar, moderate rep ranges, as well as our heaviest bench presses, we can have the exact same leg drive, it allows us to build a bit more consistency with our lifting. So something to also be aware of is that the people who tend to effectively use this kind of sinking dynamic leg drive method tend to be larger males. And it makes more sense that they're going to get away with this because the method involves sinking the bar into your chest. And when you are a quite large person, you've got a big rib cage, a lot of muscle, a lot of tissue on your torso into which you can sink the bar. It makes sense though that for females or lighter or more average weight males, this method isn't going to be as effective. So where people often go wrong when trying to use leg drive is that they think about driving their heels into the ground. This might come from trying to keep their feet flat on the floor, as is the rules in drug-tested powerlifting. Your whole foot needs to be flat on the floor. However, when we think about having pressure in our heels, we end up getting our glutes on a bit more rather than our quads. And the key part for our static method of using leg drive is that we want to feel tension in our quads. One, does having tension in our heels not only not give us as stable a base, but feeling our glutes on might actually result in us extending our hips. And what that does is it picks our butt off the bench, which is against the rules of powerlifting. So instead, we want to focus on having pressure through our toes. So if you just zoom down for me, Donnie, if I'm putting pressure through my toes, even in a standing position, what does that do? It makes me feel like I'm about to kick my leg off the floor. And obviously in doing that, I'm feeling my quad is working because it's the quad that's going to extend my leg off the floor. So if we have no weight in our hands, what will actually happen if we do this properly is we should be able to get ourselves to slide back up the bench press, because as we're pushing our feet into the floor, we're pushing ourselves back up the bench. Now obviously once we start to add weight in our hands, this isn't going to actually happen, but what will happen is we'll be creating force through our body, through our feet in the floor, pushing back towards the rack, which is ultimately what we want for our bench press. We want to get the bar back towards the rack as we press. So if we're having tension going back towards the rack through our body, this is going to set us up for successful bench pressing. So now that we've gone through how to use our quads to create leg drive, we're going to talk about why we want to create constant tension throughout the entire rep. So the common mistake people make when using this leg drive method is that they don't use their legs on the whole time. What commonly happens is people will have their legs on at about 80% on the way down, and it's only when they go to press that they really put their legs on 100%. From when we unrack the bar, we want to feel our quads on as much as we can the entire time. As we've mentioned previously in the video, this method is good because it allows us to be consistent every single rep. And if we can just have our legs on completely, this is a fixed spot. It's not kind of a variable spot that we might hit better sometimes and not hit as good other times. If we're just fully on all the time, we can replicate this rep after rep, set after set. So the key thing for us to do is right from the empty barbell all the way up as we're working up in weight, getting our legs on the way down, on the pause and on the press, keeping them on all the time. So why this really matters also is that keeping our chest up in the bench press and keeping our quads on kind of work in unison. If our leg drive kind of relaxes a little bit, naturally our chest caves. Obviously in powerlifting, we're trying to move the most amount of weight. So to minimize the range of motion, we want to pull our chest up. This involves us, number one, actively pulling our chest up, but two, if we keep our legs on, we will actively be able to keep our chest up throughout the entire rep. So we talked before about how using our leg drive allows us to pick our chest up and minimize our range of motion. So cut over this, we're gonna have Elise demonstrating what happens when she lets her legs relax, doesn't really try to pull her heels under her, how much of an arch she can create, versus when she pulls her heels under her, the big arch she's able to create by using a bit of leg drive. This is one of the reasons why creating a leg drive using our quads is really important. We can really reduce that range of motion and get ourselves in the most efficient bench press position as possible. So let's just summarize why we want you to use the static leg drive method. Number one, it allows us to create tension in our quads. This is going to allow us to pick our chest up as much as possible and to minimize range of motion. Number two, it's not going to have us have our hips picking up off the bench if we're thinking about keeping our glutes on or extending through the hip. The final reason is that it allows us to create something that's replicable rep to rep. If we're using a dynamic method, it's hard to make sure we're doing it the same every rep. If we keep it static, we can make this a fixed leg drive that we can use with the empty barbells, with moderate reps, or with high weights. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you for watching. Please leave a comment down below, give us a like, and chuck us a subscribe if you haven't already. Special thanks to our big benchers who are featured in today's video. And finally, if you're in Melbourne, on the 27th of March, we'll be holding a squat workshop here at Melbourne Strength Culture. Some of the tickets are already gone, so if you're interested, definitely get in quick. The links will be down below in the bio. Happy lifting. Crazy.